Hey everybody, so this is the group, the combined wolf packs, getting ready to move back to Alaska.
Alaskan Bush People gave viewers a front-row seat to the rugged, untamed lives of the Brown family as they tackled the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, each member pulling their weight to keep their off-the-grid homestead thriving. From brutal winters to run-ins with wildlife, they faced it all, but no one expected the tragedy that would rock their family to the core and spell the end of their journey on the show What Happened to Shatter This Wild Legacy. Let's dig into the heartbreaking event that changed music. Living off the land. Everything living off the land. The Brown family of Alaskan Bush People was known for their unique self-sufficient lifestyle rooted deeply in the wilderness of Alaska long before their story reached reality television. Living in isolation far from the conveniences of modern society, they adapted to the harsh Alaskan terrain, finding ways to survive with limited resources they never expected. A massive reality TV show that people all over the world loved, and also that a massive tragedy would cause its ending. Way before the show began, the Browns, headed by Billy and Amy Brown, chose to leave in a way that was closer to nature, more connected to the land, and away from what most people consider ordinary comforts. Billy had come from Texas but was drawn to the raw, untamed aspects of Alaska. He wanted his family to live a simpler life, relying on each other and the land, which meant giving up the conveniences that most families rely on. Amy, his wife, supported this vision, and together they moved further and further into Alaska's wilderness, eventually finding a remote area to call home. Building a shelter in the Alaskan wilderness wasn't easy, especially given the extreme weather conditions. Winters were brutal, with temperatures dropping well below freezing. Knowing this, the family constructed their own cabins using the resources around them. With wood from the surrounding forests, they would build log shelters, often by hand. Each shelter had to be durable enough to withstand strong winds, heavy snow, and rain. To keep these cabins warm, the family often relied on wood-burning stoves using logs they had chopped themselves. This required a significant amount of work, since chopping and gathering wood was a daily task. As temperatures dropped, keeping enough wood for heat became a priority. Each family member was involved in this process, learning how to handle an axe and cut wood safely. One of the primary ways the Browns sustained themselves was through hunting. They would hunt for large game, including deer and moose, animals that provided food that could last for months if preserved correctly. The meat from a single animal would be carefully rationed and preserved by drying or smoking to ensure it would last through the winter months when food was scarcer. Every hunt was a group effort requiring patience, knowledge of the landscape, and an understanding of animal behavior. Fishing was another essential part of their diet. Alaskan rivers and coastal areas provided a natural supply of fish, particularly salmon, which could be smoked or salted to last longer. Fishing wasn't just about catching enough for a meal, it was about catching enough to store for later. The Browns became skilled at preserving fish, creating makeshift smoke houses to dry and cure their catch, and learning how to keep their food safe from wild animals like bears. Foraging was a daily activity, especially during the warmer months. The Browns learned to identify edible plants, berries, and mushrooms that grew in the wild. This knowledge was crucial, since it allowed them to add variety to their diet. They knew which berries were safe to eat and which to avoid, as well as which plants had medicinal properties that could be used if someone got sick. Living in the Alaskan wilderness required a reliable water source, and this was a significant concern for the Browns. They often lived near streams, rivers, or natural springs to have easy access to fresh water. However, drinking directly from these sources wasn't always safe. The family developed ways to purify their water, using techniques like boiling or filtering it with rock, sand, and charcoal. During colder months, finding water became even more challenging. Streams could freeze over, making it difficult to collect water. When this happened, they would melt snow or ice, taking the time to ensure they had enough water not only to drink but also to cook and wash. Collecting and storing enough water was an ongoing task that required constant attention, particularly in winter. Clothing was another crucial aspect of their survival strategy. The Browns had to be prepared for Alaska's extreme weather conditions, which often meant creating or adapting their own clothing. They learned how to layer effectively using fur and other natural materials. For insulation, they would often reuse on-purpose clothing items, stitching together materials to create coats, gloves, and hats. Over time, they developed practical methods to ensure everyone had appropriate gear. Living off the land required everyone's involvement, and each family member played a role in the survival of the group. Children were taught survival skills from a young age: how to chop wood, identify edible plants, hunt, and fish. The family also had to be flexible and resourceful. If something broke, they fixed it themselves, often using whatever materials were available. Necessity pushed them to learn how to make their own repairs, whether it was fixing a cabin roof or mending a fishing net. Self-reliance wasn't just a lifestyle, it was a necessity for survival. Living far from any towns, or hospitals meant that the family couldn't rely on medical assistance. If someone got sick or injured, they had to know basic first aid and find natural remedies in their surroundings. Certain plants they foraged were used for medicinal purposes, helping to relieve minor ailments. In case of more serious injuries, their only option was to travel to the nearest town, which could be horse or even days away. This distance made the family more cautious, as a severe injury could mean a life-threatening situation. Though they lived far from populated areas, the Browns occasionally interacted with other Alaskan settlers or townsfolk. These connections were minimal but could sometimes be helpful in acquiring resources or learning new skills. In some cases, they might trade with other locals for supplies they couldn't produce. Discovery Channel approach themselves. The Discovery Channel approaches a strange family. For years they lived in relative isolation, developing a lifestyle of self-reliance that few could match. Then came the turning point that would shift their lives in an entirely new direction when the Discovery Channel approached the Browns with a proposition to document their lifestyle for television. It marked the beginning of an incredible transition for the family, from an isolated life in the wild to one of unexpected fame. Discovery Channel producers were intrigued by the family's extreme way of life. They were searching for authentic stories about people who were managing to survive entirely off the land. In harsh environments, the Browns' story struck Ackard as parents Billy and Ami had chosen a lifestyle far removed from mainstream society, and their 7 children were raised to understand and thrive in these challenging conditions. When Discovery first reached out, the Browns were hesitant. While they lived in the wilderness to escape modern society, they also knew that sharing their way of life could be an opportunity to make a better living while staying true to their roots. Eventually they agreed to let cameras into their world. In 2014, Alaskan Bush People debuted, capturing the Brown family's journey of surviving the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, their day-to-day struggles and their way of life. Each member of the Brown family contributed something unique to their story, and viewers quickly became fascinated by their resilient sense of adventure and the deep bond they shared. At its heart, the show was about family and the unique culture they had built in the middle of nowhere. As the show began, Billy, the father and patriarch of the family, took on a central role. A natural storyteller, Billy conveyed the family's lifestyle to viewers with a deep sense of purpose. He was driven by a vision to live freely in nature, independent of modern society. Billy often shared his philosophies on self-sufficiency and instilled these values in each of his children. His experience and knowledge helped guide the family through each season, particularly during challenging times. Billy had lived through hardships before moving to Alaska, and his adaptability became crucial in leading his family through their new televised lifestyle. Ami, the matriarch, played a quieter but equally essential role. She was the family's cornerstone, always providing support and a nurturing presence. Ami handled many of the family's needs, from cooking to managing their health. She had always been in the background, ensuring everything ran smoothly while her children grew up learning how to survive and make the most of what they had. The Brown children raised in the wilderness each brought their own personality and skills to the family dynamic, and they quickly became fan favorites as the show progressed. Matt, the oldest son, had a love for the outdoors that matched his father's spirit. From a young age, he had been Billy's right-hand man in all the family's ventures. He was outgoing, resourceful, and often took charge of physically demanding tasks. Matt's personality drew viewers, and though over the seasons he would face personal struggles that occasionally took him away from the family's daily activities, Joshua, better known as Bam Bam, the second oldest, was practical and a bit more independent-minded than his siblings. Known for being serious and organized, Bam Bam often questioned his father's plans and sometimes wanted a more structured life. Although his approach was different from Billy's, Bam Bam was a loyal family member who contributed to the family's efforts with his hands-on skills. Bear, the third son, brought a unique energy to the family and the show. Wild and adventurous, Bear was known in the show for his love of the outdoors, often running through the forest and climbing trees. He was sometimes referred to as nature's wild child, embodying the family's adventurous spirit. Gabe, the next in line, was hardworking, dependable, and showed a sensitive, empathetic side. Noah, the fifth son, had a personality that set him apart from his brothers. With a scientific and creative mind, Noah was the inventor of the family, liked to experiment, create, and fix things, often finding innovative solutions to the challenges they faced in the wilderness. His resourcefulness made him valuable in the family, and viewers enjoyed watching his quirky ideas and inventions come to life. The two youngest, Birdie and Rain, brought fresh energy to the family. Birdie was fiercely independent and had a strong connection to nature and animals, often spending time observing wildlife and exploring the land on her own. Rain, the youngest of the family, brightened the sometimes harsh life. She was the imaginative Curious and fearless one as Alaskan Bush People continued, the family faced new pressures and challenges. Living in front of cameras brought an element of visibility they hadn't experienced before. Some family members adjusted more easily while others struggled with the exposure and its effects. Still, they managed to adapt, and as they did, their life in the Alaskan bush became even more interesting to viewers. The family continued to build shelters, hunt, fish, and survive in the wilderness. Over time, the show storylines evolved. The family faced both natural and personal hardships, from injuries to health problems. Amy's battle with cancer was particularly challenging for the family and marked a serious moment in the show. As the seasons passed, Alaskan Bush People showed how the family continued to adapt and change. They faced evolving challenges, including occasional conflicts with authorities about land use. Over time, the Browns' life shifted. They explored new areas in the lower 48 states, particularly after Amy's health, which made it harder for them to leave in the remote Alaskan bush. The family relocated to Washington state, where they continued their off-grid lifestyle, adjusting their routines and habits to the new landscape. But they didn't know that a massive tragedy would cause the show to end. And no, I'm not talking about the huge fire that destroyed their homestead. A massive fire destroys their homestead. Like many families living in remote areas, they face the relentless challenges of nature, which culminated in a dramatic wildfire that changed everything for them. The 2020 season finale with a wildfire became a pivotal moment in their lives, marking the end of their life at the homestead and forcing them to return to Alaska. For the Browns, living in the wilderness was not just a choice but a lifestyle deeply rooted in their identity. They had spent years building their homestead in Washington. The family's dedication to self-sufficiency and their connection to the land had always been a source of pride. However, as summer turned to fall in 2020, the threat of wildfire loomed over many parts of the western United States, including their homestead. As the summer progressed, the family noticed changes in the environment. The temperatures were rising and the area experienced a severe drought, drying out the forest and increasing the risk of wildfires. The Browns were no strangers to fire hazards. They had learned the hard way about the dangers of the wilderness. Nevertheless, the reality of a wildfire was different from the theoretical dangers they had been prepared for in the past. They could sense that something serious was brewing, but they held on to hope that they would be spared from disaster. The fire started with little warning. One evening, the family was alerted by neighbors that a blaze had ignited nearby. Initially, it seemed manageable, but with the high winds and dry conditions, the flames quickly spread. What began as a small fire turned into a raging inferno that engulfed everything in its path. The Browns, with their deep-rooted knowledge of the land, sprang into action. They worked tirelessly, trying to protect their home and belongings. They packed what they could and attempted to create fire breaks around their property, hoping to minimize the damage. As the fire approached, the family faced the heartbreaking realization that their years of hard work and dedication could be lost in a matter of moments. They had built their lives around their homestead, creating a place that felt like home, and now it was at risk of being destroyed. The atmosphere was tense as they fought against the elements, working as a unit to protect their sanctuary. For an entire week, the fire raged on, threatening their home and everything they held dear. The family endured long days filled with smoke and ash, struggling against fatigue and fear. They watched as the flames consumed the surrounding forest, hearing the crackling of trees falling and the relentless roar of the wildfire. The reality of the situation settled heavily on their shoulders. They were in a battle against nature that seemed impossible. Although many thought that their family bond was unbreakable, one tragedy started an avalanche and caused the ending of the Alaskan Bush People. An evil wife. Noah Brown was always the fan favorite, known for his quirky outfits and an inventive, creative mind. This is why after his departure, fans put on their detective hats and went to work. They couldn't believe that Noah would just simply leave without a concrete reason. They decided that the relationships between Noah and the family grew increasingly complicated because of Noah's wife Rain. Fans never liked her very much, especially after changing her name from Ruth to Rain. They believed she wanted to steal his sister's name, although she said she did it to align more closely with Noah's family. Rain has been characterized by some as controlling and manipulative. Their relationship often raises eyebrows among fans who have observed how Rain seems to exert a strong influence over Noah. Noah's siblings, particularly B, had expressed concerns about Rain's impact on Noah. Bear's observations reflect the frustrations of a brother who feels that Noah isn't contributing to the family unit as he should. Recently, Bear visited Noah and Rain's home to lend a hand with family matters. Instead of gratitude, Bear found himself facing criticism from Rain, who claimed he was a poor houseguest. Bear's frustration was palpable when he reflected on how Noah and Rain appear to do very little to support their mother Amy, who has been battling health issues. Aisha's once Again, especially after Noah admitted that Hughes that money for personal needs. Noah has openly admitted that he is facing financial difficulties, stating that Hayes close to losing his house. In a bid for support, he even resorted to launching a petition to ask for a news how, believing that public demand could prompt a revival of their family's television presence. The situation escalated when Noah and